My name is Faye. I'm 58 years old and I have a secret that would change everything if my daughter knew. For 30 years, I quietly diverted money from my controlling husband Richard's accounts, building a $9 million fortune he never knew existed. When he died unexpectedly, I kept the secret. Last month, my daughter Samantha got married, still believing I'm just getting by on a modest widow's pension. The truth would shatter everything she thought she knew about our family. Before I tell you why I kept this secret even after Richard's death, let me know where you're watching from today. Hit that like button if you've ever had to make difficult choices to protect yourself or someone you love. I met Richard Winters during my first job after graduating with an economics degree from the University of Michigan. I was 23, ambitious and naive. He was 32, charismatic, and already successful as an investment banker. From our first meeting in the elevator of the financial firm where I worked as a junior analyst, he pursued me with an intensity I mistook for passionate love. "You're different from other women," he told me on our third date at an exclusive restaurant I could never have afforded on my entry-level salary. "You understand how the world really works." Within 6 months, we were married in a lavish ceremony that Richard insisted on paying for entirely. My parents, middle-class teachers from a small town in Wisconsin, seemed overwhelmed by my new world. My father pulled me aside during the reception. "Are you sure about this, Faye? Everything's happening so fast." I dismissed his concerns with the confidence only youth can provide. "Dad, Richard respects my intelligence. We're going to be partners in everything." The shift happened so gradually I barely noticed it at first. Richard suggested I quit my job 3 months into our marriage when his promotion came through. "Why work for pennies when I make dollars?" he reasoned. "Besides, I need someone to manage our social calendar if I'm going to keep climbing." It seemed logical at the time, even flattering. He valued my organizational skills, my social grace. What I didn't understand was that I was taking the first step toward complete financial dependence. Within a year, Richard had taken control of all our accounts. My name remained on joint accounts, but I needed to explain every purchase. He reviewed credit card statements with surgical precision. $70 at the bookstore, Faye. What could you possibly need that costs $70? When I mentioned opening my own checking account, his charming smile disappeared. "Why would we complicate our finances that way? Don't you trust me to take care of us?" By our third anniversary, Richard controlled not just our money, but increasingly my entire world. He purchased an enormous colonial home in the most exclusive suburb of Chicago, 40 minutes from my closest friend. The distance made casual get-togethers nearly impossible. When I suggested having friends over, Richard usually had work conflicts or criticized my choices. Julia, the public defender. What could you possibly still have in common with her? Julia had been my college roommate and remained my closest friend, despite Richard's disdain. She saw through him before anyone else did. "He's isolating you, Faye," she warned during one of our increasingly rare lunch dates. "Financial control is about power, not money." I defended Richard reflexively. "He's just careful with money. You don't understand the pressure he's under." When I became pregnant with Samantha in our 4th year of marriage, Richard became even more controlling. He monitored my prenatal diet, questioned my doctor's recommendations, and made unilateral decisions about everything, from the nursery design to which hospital I would deliver at. After Samantha was born, he used my devotion to her as another form of control. "You want to be a good mother, don't you?" he would say whenever I expressed interest in resuming my career. "Samantha needs you at home." The pattern continued for years. Richard's financial success grew exponentially. We lived in luxury, but it was a gilded cage. I drove an expensive car he selected, wore designer clothes he approved, and attended social functions where I played the role of the perfect corporate wife. But I had no money of my own, no career, no independence. The emotional abuse was subtle but constant. He never hit me, but his words left invisible bruises. "You're lucky I handle the finances. You'd be completely lost on your own. Most men wouldn't put up with your spending habits. And this is why women shouldn't make investment decisions." I believed him. After years of this treatment, I had lost confidence in my abilities, especially regarding money. The economics degree that had once been my pride gathered dust in my mind, seemingly irrelevant to my life as Mrs. Richard Winters. The turning point came when Samantha was 12. While organizing Richard's home office during his business trip to London, I discovered emails between him and a woman named Veronica. Their explicit content left no doubt about their relationship. Further searching revealed 3 other affairs spanning our entire marriage. When I confronted him upon his return, Richard didn't deny the affairs. Instead, he turned it back on me. "What did you expect? You've let yourself go. If you were meeting my needs at home, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere." I did something then that shocked us both. I packed bags for Samantha and myself and drove to Julia's apartment in the city. For 3 days, I experienced freedom. Julia, now a successful divorce attorney, outlined how I could leave Richard and start over. But the reality was devastating. With no recent work experience, no access to our joint assets without his approval, and Richard's connections throughout Chicago's financial world, my prospects were bleak. Richard's response was calculated. He froze all our accounts, reported the car I was driving as stolen, and threatened to fight for full custody of Samantha, claiming my mental instability and abandonment of the family home. "He can't possibly win custody," Julia assured me. "Can you guarantee that—" I asked, thinking of Samantha's stable school life, her friends, her routine. Julia's silence was answer enough. Richard had the resources to drag out a legal battle for years, painting me as an unstable, financially irresponsible mother. Meanwhile, Samantha would be caught in the middle. I returned home under the guise of reconciliation. Richard was magnanimous in what he perceived as victory. "I forgive you," he announced, as if my reaction to his infidelity was the real transgression. "Family comes first. We'll put this unfortunate episode behind us." That night, after Richard fell asleep, I sat in our dark kitchen and made a promise to myself. I would never allow myself to be this vulnerable again. I would find a way out that protected both Samantha and myself. If Richard controlled the money, then financial independence would be my secret weapon. I began plotting my escape not for tomorrow, but for someday. A someday when Samantha would be grown, when I could leave without destroying her childhood. A someday that required patience, secrecy, and careful planning. What Richard had forgotten about me, what I had almost forgotten about myself, was that I once had a brilliant mind for numbers. And now that mind had a purpose. My first step toward financial independence was seemingly innocent. I approached Richard about returning to work part-time. "Samantha's in school full days now," I reasoned. "I'm feeling a bit restless at home." Richard predictably resisted. "We don't need the money, and I need you available for social events." I had anticipated this response and prepared my counter-argument. "Actually, Jean Thompson mentioned that her husband's financial advisory firm needs someone part-time for client relations. It's only 15 hours a week, and it would look good for your image. A wife who contributes to the community rather than just shops." Appealing to Richard's image concerns worked. Jean was married to a golf buddy of Richard's, someone he was always trying to impress. The position would be respectable, not threatening, and conveniently flexible around his schedule. "Fine," he conceded, "but your first priority is still this family." What Richard didn't realize was that I had specifically targeted this position. Walter Thompson's firm handled wealth management for many of Chicago's elite families. Working there would give me access to financial knowledge and contacts I desperately needed. I was meticulous in covering my tracks from the very beginning. I opened a small, personal checking account using my maiden name at a bank across town, explaining to the manager that I was helping my elderly mother manage her finances. I had my minimal paychecks directly deposited there rather than our joint account. I'd rather save this money separately for Christmas gifts and surprises, I told Richard when he asked why I didn't just deposit my checks into our main account. The explanation appealed to his ego, and he stopped asking questions. The job provided more than just a separate income stream. It educated me about wealth management strategies I never would have learned otherwise. During lunch breaks, I studied investment patterns, tax strategies, and offshore banking. I befriended Diane in the accounting department, who unwittingly became my financial education tutor. "You have such a natural mind for this," she commented, after I helped her reconcile a particularly complex client portfolio. "You should consider getting certified." I did exactly that, using my shopping money to pay for online financial certification courses, studying late at night after Richard was asleep. To him, I appeared to be simply taking my part-time job seriously. In reality, I was building the expertise I would need to execute my plan. Julia remained my closest confidant and most valuable ally. Now, specializing in high-asset divorce cases, she provided crucial legal advice. "What you're doing is risky, Faye," she warned during one of our clandestine lunch meetings. "Courts generally frown on hiding marital assets." "I'm not planning to divorce him yet," I explained. "I'm creating options for a future when Samantha isn't caught in the crossfire." Through Julia's connections, I established a shell company called Horizon Consulting. On paper, it provided market research services. In reality, it was a vehicle for me to divert and invest small amounts of money without detection. The first major opportunity came during Richard's annual bonus season in my second year of planning. He received a $700,000 bonus and was in a rare, generous mood. "I'm transferring $50,000 to your shopping account," he announced proudly. "Get yourself something special." Instead of spending it on designer clothes or jewelry, as Richard expected, I funneled $40,000 through a complex series of transactions into my growing secret fund. I kept meticulous records of every dollar, partly for practical reasons, and partly because I needed to justify my actions to myself. This wasn't theft, I reasoned. This was survival insurance. As the years passed, my financial skills grew alongside my hidden assets. I learned to identify emerging technology stocks before they boomed. I made early investments in companies like Amazon, Apple, and Google when they were still considered risky bets. I diversified into real estate through carefully structured limited partnerships that couldn't be traced back to me. There were close calls. When Richard decided to surprise me by preparing our taxes himself one year, instead of using his accountant, I spent a terrifying week retrieving and hiding documentation that might have revealed my secret accounts. Another time, he questioned why I was spending so much time researching investment trends for that little job of yours. "Walter has me working on a special project," I explained. "It's fascinating learning about different investment approaches." Richard laughed condescendingly. "Just don't start thinking you understand enough to manage our money, sweetheart. That takes years of experience." Little did he know that I was accumulating exactly that experience along with a portfolio that was growing beyond my wildest expectations. By the time Samantha was in high school, my secret fund had grown to over $3 million. By her senior year, it approached $5 million. The emotional toll of the double life was significant. I lived with constant fear of discovery, guilt about the deception, and anxiety about the future. But watching Samantha grow into a strong, confident young woman reinforced my resolve. Unlike me, she would never be financially trapped by anyone. When Samantha left for college at Northwestern, I began preparing for the final phase of my plan. My secret assets had grown to nearly $7 million, carefully spread across multiple investment vehicles and offshore accounts. Julia helped me prepare the legal groundwork for a divorce that would protect these assets while ensuring I received fair settlement from our marital property. "You've pulled off something remarkable," Julia told me during one of our planning sessions. "Most women in your situation never break free." "I haven't broken free yet," I reminded her, "but I'm almost ready." My timeline called for initiating divorce proceedings after Samantha's college graduation, when she would be less emotionally and financially impacted by the family rupture. I had prepared for every contingency, developed responses for every potential reaction from Richard. What I hadn't prepared for was Richard's sudden death. The call came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing quarterly statements from my hidden accounts when Richard's assistant, Jennifer, called. "Mrs. Winters." Her voice trembled. "There's been an incident. Richard collapsed during a meeting. They've taken him to Northwestern Memorial." The next hours passed in a blur. By the time I reached the hospital, Richard had already been pronounced dead. "Massive heart attack," the doctor said. "No warning signs, no chance of survival." I stood by his body in the hospital room, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. This man had controlled and diminished me for 30 years. He had cheated repeatedly, manipulated our daughter's affection, and stripped me of autonomy. Yet seeing him lying there, suddenly vulnerable and still, I felt an unexpected grief mingled with my shock. "Mom!" Samantha burst into the room, her face streaked with tears. She had driven straight from her college campus when I called. "What happened?" "He was fine last weekend when I had lunch with him." I held my sobbing 20-year-old daughter, the reality of our situation slowly crystallizing. Richard was gone. My elaborate exit plan had just been rendered irrelevant. I was free, but now faced a completely different set of challenges. The days following Richard's death revealed truths about our financial situation that shocked even me, despite my years of secret financial investigation. Richard, the supposed financial genius, had been living far beyond even our considerable means. He had remortgaged our house without my knowledge, using my signature on documents I had apparently signed without reading years earlier. His personal financial advisor, Marcus Phillips, requested a private meeting 3 days after the funeral. "Mrs. Winters, I'm afraid there are some difficult matters we need to discuss," he began solemnly. "Richard made some high-risk investments in the past year that didn't perform as expected." "How bad is it?" I asked, maintaining the persona of the financially naive widow that Richard had always believed me to be. "He borrowed heavily against several assets," Marcus explained, "and there are gambling debts I don't believe you were aware of." As Marcus detailed Richard's financial mismanagement, I struggled to contain my reaction. The man who had scrutinized my $70 bookstore purchase had lost millions in high-stakes poker games. The financial mastermind who belittled my understanding of money had made disastrous investments based on tips from his equally reckless friends. More revelations followed. A woman named Diane Carson appeared at our home the day after the funeral, her expensive clothing and nervous demeanor immediately triggering my suspicions. "Richard was helping me establish my interior design business," she explained awkwardly. "He promised to finalize the funding this week." It took little investigation to discover she was his most recent mistress. Through Julia's discreet inquiries, I learned Richard had promised to set her up in business and had already given her substantial loans that were clearly never intended to be repaid. "The man was living a complete double life," Julia said during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "The question is, what are you going to do about your own secret now?" It was a question I struggled with intensely. My hidden fortune remained untouched and unknown to everyone, except Julia and my financial advisor in the Cayman Islands. With Richard gone, I could simply reveal its existence and use it to clear the debts he'd left behind. But complications abounded. How would I explain the money's existence after 30 years of apparent financial naivety? The IRS would have serious questions about funds that had never been declared on our joint tax returns. Richard's creditors might have legal claims against any marital assets, even those he hadn't known existed. Most importantly, there was Samantha. She had adored her father despite his flaws. He had carefully maintained a loving, generous persona with her, even while controlling and diminishing me. Revealing the truth now would shatter her grief process and force her to reconceive her entire childhood. "I need to protect Samantha first," I told Julia. "She's already lost her father. I won't destroy her memories of him, too." I made a difficult decision. I would continue the charade of being the financially struggling widow, at least for now. I would use only a small portion of my hidden funds laundered through careful channels Julia helped establish to address the most pressing of Richard's debts. The beautiful family home, where I'd felt like a prisoner for decades, was sold to pay off the mortgage and gambling debts. I publicly downsized to a modest 3-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood, explaining to Samantha and our social circle that it was all I could afford, given the financial mess Richard had left behind. "I had no idea Dad was so bad with money," Samantha said while helping me move into the new house. "He always seemed so on top of everything." "Your father was a complex man," I replied carefully. "He kept many things to himself." The statement was true, if incomplete. I was doing exactly what Richard had done, compartmentalizing my financial reality. The difference was, my deception wasn't designed to control others, but to protect my daughter, while I figured out a path forward. As Richard's estate went through probate, I played the role of the grieving widow discovering unpleasant financial surprises at every turn. In reality, I was quietly orchestrating which debts would be paid, which creditors would be settled with, and how the estate would be distributed. Throughout it all, my secret fortune remained secure, growing even as Richard's visible legacy diminished. $9 million waited in accounts and investments around the world, my private victory over a man who had believed until his dying day that I couldn't balance a checkbook without his supervision. My new home became a symbol of my emerging, authentic life. Though modest by the standards of our previous neighborhood, I chose it carefully for its solid construction, bright sunlight, and private garden. I painted the walls colors Richard would have disapproved of arranged furniture for comfort, rather than appearance, and gradually replaced the designer items he had selected with pieces that reflected my own taste. "Your new place has such good energy, Mom," Samantha commented during one of her visits from college. "You seem different here, more relaxed." She was right. Without Richard's looming presence, I was rediscovering myself. I joined a book club, took cooking classes, and volunteered at a local literacy program. Each activity represented a small freedom previously denied or discouraged. Financially, I maintained the appearance of careful budgeting appropriate for a widow of modest means. I drove a practical car, shopped sales, and expressed appropriate concern about future retirement security. Meanwhile, my hidden millions continued growing under expert management. The double life created occasional challenges. When friends from our old social circle invited me to expensive restaurants or exclusive events, I would decline, citing budget constraints. Some friendships faded as a result, but I discovered these were mostly connections to Richard, rather than genuine relationships of my own. New, more authentic friendships took their place. Without Richard's filtering influence, I found myself drawn to creative, independent women I would never have met in our previous life. Gina, a retired professor who led my book club. Teresa, a divorced entrepreneur who taught the cooking class and later became a close confidant. Daniel, a widower from my volunteer program who became a valued friend and occasional dinner companion. None of these new friends knew about my hidden wealth. It was easier that way, keeping the secret limited to just Julia and my offshore financial team. The fewer people who knew, the less chance of accidental revelation. The greatest joy of this period was developing a more honest relationship with Samantha. Without Richard's manipulative presence, we connected as adults with genuine respect for each other's perspectives. I was careful never to criticize Richard directly, but I no longer felt compelled to maintain his carefully constructed family mythology either. When Samantha questioned why I had stayed in such an obviously controlling marriage, I answered truthfully, if incompletely. "I stayed because I loved you and wanted to give you stability," I explained, "and because leaving seemed more frightening than staying. Financial dependence is a powerful cage, sweetheart. Never let yourself be trapped that way." These conversations shaped Samantha's own approach to independence. She worked throughout college, despite not strictly needing to proudly paying for her own textbooks and spending money. She chose a career in environmental law based on passion rather than salary potential. She developed a healthy skepticism about displays of wealth, having seen firsthand the emptiness behind our family's former facade. I found ways to help her subtly without revealing my secret. When she needed a reliable car for her internship, I discovered a special dealer incentive program. When she worried about student loan debt for law school, I researched scholarships until finding one she qualified for. Each intervention was carefully disguised as good fortune rather than financial assistance. Perhaps the most meaningful use of my hidden funds came through anonymous philanthropy. Working through a web of carefully structured donations, I established a foundation supporting women leaving financially abusive relationships. The Monarch Foundation, named for the butterfly symbol of transformation, provided housing assistance, career retraining, and legal support to women whose situations mirrored my own former imprisonment. "Have you seen this new women's foundation in Chicago?" Samantha asked excitedly during her final year of law school. "They're doing amazing work with financial literacy for abuse survivors. I'm thinking about volunteering with them." I smiled at the irony. "That sounds wonderful. You'd have so much to offer." I never told her that I had created and funded the very organization that had captured her passion. Some secrets were worth keeping, at least for now. As my confidence grew, so did my investment portfolio. Working with my offshore team, I diversified into sustainable energy companies, women-led startups, and ethical real estate developments. By the 5th anniversary of Richard's death, my hidden fortune had grown from $7 million to $9 million, all while I appeared to live comfortably, but modestly on my widow's pension and part-time income from occasional financial consulting work. When Samantha completed law school and secured a position with an environmental law firm in Chicago, I felt tremendous pride in her independence. Unlike me at her age, she was building a life based on her own values and abilities, not seeking security through a relationship. Then she met James. James Taylor was nothing like Richard, which was precisely why I approved of him immediately. Where Richard had been commanding and charismatic, James was gentle and thoughtful. Where Richard flaunted wealth and status, James found satisfaction in his work as a high school history teacher and basketball coach. He listened more than he spoke, supported Samantha's ambitions without competitive edge, and treated everyone from restaurant servers to his students' parents with equal respect. "What do you think of him, Mom?" Samantha asked nervously after introducing us over dinner at my home. "He seems like someone who values the right things." I answered honestly. "But what matters is how he treats you and whether you can build a real partnership together." Despite my outward neutrality, I conducted a thorough background investigation through channels established during my years of secret financial planning. James came from a working-class family in Michigan, had worked his way through state college with scholarships and part-time jobs, and carried moderate student loan debt. He was responsibly repaying. He had no secret gambling habits, no suspicious financial transactions, no hidden life like Richard had maintained. Most importantly, he genuinely adored my daughter for her mind, her passion for environmental justice, and her authentic self, rather than using her as an accessory to his own ego. Their relationship progressed naturally. They moved in together after a year of dating, renting a small apartment near both their workplaces. They adopted a rescue dog, planted a community garden plot, and built a social circle of similarly value-driven young professionals. The engagement announcement came during a casual Sunday brunch at their apartment. No grand gesture, no expensive ring, just a simple expression of commitment to building a life together. "We want a small wedding," Samantha explained. "Nothing extravagant, just family and close friends." As they discussed wedding plans, I noticed James's parents' financial limitations. They were kind, hard-working people who had already sacrificed substantially to help their younger son through college. A wedding, even a modest one, would strain their resources considerably. "Dad would have thrown me the wedding of the century," Samantha commented wistfully during a mother-daughter lunch. "Remember Allison Blackwood's wedding? Her father spent a fortune on that event." The comment caught me off guard. Samantha rarely expressed materialistic desires, especially ones connected to Richard. "Is that what you want?" I asked carefully. "Something elaborate like Allison's wedding?" She sighed, looking embarrassed. "Not really. James and I believe in simplicity, but sometimes I dream about having just a few luxury touches without worrying about the budget. The perfect venue, beautiful flowers, a photographer who really captures the moment. Silly, right?" In that moment, I almost told her everything. The words rose to my throat. "I can give you any wedding you want. I have $9 million your father never knew about. But the complications of that revelation held me back. Instead, I made a different offer. I've been saving a little each month since you were in college." I said the half-truth coming easily after years of similar misdirections. "Nothing extravagant, but enough to help with your wedding. Let me do this for you, Samantha." Her eyes widened. "Mom, you don't have to do that. I know money has been tight since Dad died." "Some things are worth sacrificing for," I replied. "Your happiness is one of them." The wedding planning began in earnest. I played my role carefully, suggesting budget-friendly alternatives, while secretly arranging upgrades. When Samantha fell in love with a lakeside venue beyond their price range, I discovered a cancellation date that came with a significant discount. When she admired flowers that were out of season and expensive, I found a new local grower offering special rates. James's parents contributed what they could, primarily handling the rehearsal dinner with touching enthusiasm. They never suspected that the discounts and lucky finds were actually my subtle subsidizing of the celebration. My most elaborate deception involved the wedding photography. Samantha had found a renowned photographer whose work she adored, but whose fees were far beyond their budget. "This is Amanda Laurent's work," she showed me on her phone. "Isn't it incredible how she captures those small emotional moments? But she's completely out of our league." 2 weeks later, I orchestrated an elaborate contest through a bridal magazine where Samantha won a free wedding photography package with none other than Amanda Laurent. The photographer generously compensated through discreet channels played along perfectly. "You have the most incredible luck, Mom," Samantha marveled. "First the venue discount, then the flower connection. Now this contest win. Just fortunate timing," I demurred. As the wedding approached, I found myself increasingly uncomfortable with the deception. Each time Samantha thanked me for stretching my modest means to help her. Each time James expressed sincere gratitude for my contributions, my guilt intensified. The wedding day itself was perfect. Samantha was radiant in a gown we had found at a sample sale, though I had secretly paid for extensive alterations to make it fit perfectly. James looked at her with undisguised adoration as they exchanged thoughtfully written vows. The lakeside setting glowed with the sunset colors as guests enjoyed a celebration that appeared tastefully modest while actually incorporating numerous carefully disguised luxuries. During the reception, Samantha offered a toast that brought tears to my eyes. To my mother, who has always put my happiness above her own, Mom, you taught me that true wealth isn't about money, but about having the courage to live authentically. Everything beautiful about today happened because of your creativity, your resourcefulness, and your love. I smiled through my tears, feeling both proud and fraudulent. If she only knew the extent of my deception, would she still see me as a model of authentic living? Later that evening, I overheard a conversation between the newlyweds that would ultimately change everything. Standing near the venue's garden, not realizing I was within earshot, James and Samantha discussed their future plans. "I wish we could buy a house sooner," Samantha said. "That apartment is fine for now, but the neighborhood isn't where I'd want to raise children." "We'll get there," James assured her. "Once my student loans are paid down a bit more, and if you can stick with the corporate law position a while longer, we can save enough for a down payment in a better area." "I know you're right," Samantha sighed. "I just hate that firm. The environmental cases are always secondary to their corporate clients. But the health insurance is essential if we want to start trying for a baby next year." "Maybe we should wait on the baby plans," James suggested gently. "Give ourselves another year or two to be more financially stable." "Maybe," Samantha agreed reluctantly. "I just always imagined being a young mother, and I'd love to have the option of staying home at least part-time when we do have kids." Their words echoed in my mind long after the wedding celebration ended. My daughter was delaying her dreams, compromising her career principles, and living in an unsafe neighborhood, while I sat on $9 million that could solve all these challenges instantly. What had started as protection, both of myself from Richard and later of Samantha from painful truths about her father, had evolved into something else entirely. My secret was no longer serving either of us. It was time to reconsider whether this particular truth might finally set us both free. 3 months after Samantha's wedding, the weight of my secret became increasingly unbearable. Each visit to her small apartment in a neighborhood plagued by property crime, each conversation about their careful budgeting, each mention of the soul-crushing corporate job she'd taken for the benefits rather than the environmental law position she truly wanted, all of it felt like a personal indictment. The breaking point came unexpectedly. During a routine medical checkup, my doctor found a concerning mass in my breast. Although it ultimately proved benign, the 2-week period of uncertainty forced me to confront my mortality and legacy in new ways. If something happened to me, what would become of the money I had established a will through my offshore connections that would transfer everything to Samantha, but without context or explanation? She would suddenly receive an enormous inheritance with no understanding of its origins, complete with complicated tax implications and potential legal questions about how her financially struggling mother had amassed such wealth. The health scare pushed me to action. First, I consulted with Julia, who had supported my secret financial independence plan from the beginning. "It's time, Julia. I need to tell Samantha everything." "Are you sure?" my oldest friend asked. "Once this truth is out, you can't take it back. Her perception of both you and Richard will change forever." "She deserves to know," I insisted. "Not just about the money, but about who her father really was, and the choices I made in response." Next, I met with Jeffrey Barnes, a financial advisor specializing in complex asset transfers. Unlike my offshore team, Jeffrey worked domestically and could help create a legal framework for bringing my hidden assets into the open. "There will be tax consequences," Jeffrey warned, "potentially significant ones, and questions about the origins of these funds." "I understand," I replied, "but continuing this deception has its own costs that can't be measured in dollars." Together, we developed a strategy for legitimizing my assets through a series of transactions that would minimize penalties while acknowledging past omissions. It would be expensive in terms of taxes and fees, but the peace of honesty seemed worth any price. With the financial roadmap in place, I faced the most difficult step, preparing to tell Samantha. For weeks, I rehearsed different approaches, agonizing over how to explain 3 decades of deception without destroying her trust in me completely. Eventually, I decided the conversation needed to happen in person, in a private setting where we could talk without interruption. I invited Samantha and James to dinner at my home, mentioning I had important family matters to discuss. The night before their visit, I barely slept. Decades of secrecy had become a habit, almost an identity. Revealing the truth meant stepping into unknown territory, risking my relationship with the person I loved most in the world. I prepared Samantha's favorite meal, my grandmother's lasagna recipe with homemade garlic bread, hoping the comfort food might soften what would inevitably be a difficult conversation. I set the dining room table with care, placing a thick folder of financial documentation on the sideboard, out of sight, but readily available. When they arrived, Samantha immediately sensed my nervous energy. "Mom, is everything okay? You look like you haven't slept. Is this about your health? The follow-up mammogram results?" "No, sweetheart, the medical tests were all fine," I assured her, leading them into the living room for pre-dinner drinks. "What I need to talk about is something I should have told you years ago." James offered to give us privacy, but I shook my head. "You're family now, James, and what I'm about to share will affect both of you." We sat with our untouched wine glasses as I gathered my courage. Finally, I began with the simple truth. "Samantha, I have not been honest with you about our financial situation. After your father died, I led you to believe we were left with very little. The reality is—" I paused, taking a deep breath. "I have access to approximately $9 million that your father never knew existed." Her expression shifted from concern to confusion. "What, Mom? That's not possible. You sold the house. You downsized everything. You've been budgeting carefully for years." "All of that was a choice, not a necessity," I explained. "The full story starts long before your father died." Over the next hour through dinner that none of us really ate, I methodically explained the reality of my marriage to Richard. The financial control that began in our first year together. The emotional manipulation. The affairs I discovered. My failed attempt to leave when Samantha was 12. "I stayed because I couldn't bear to disrupt your childhood," I told her, watching her face carefully. "But I promised myself I would never be financially trapped again. So I started building an escape fund, one small transaction at a time." I explained the part-time job that gave me financial education, the shell company that hid my investments, the systematic diversion of small percentages from Richard's income into accounts he never discovered. Over 15 years, those small amounts grew through careful investment. By the time your father died unexpectedly, I had accumulated around $7 million. It's grown to $9 million since then. Samantha sat in stunned silence while James gently held her hand across the table. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked with emotion. "Why didn't you tell me after Dad died? Why keep pretending all this time?" This was the hardest question, the one I had dreaded most. "At first, I was concerned about legal complications," I explained. "The money had never been declared on our joint tax returns. There were questions about whether it legally belonged in your father's estate." I took another deep breath before continuing to the more difficult truth. "But mostly, Samantha, I didn't tell you because I didn't want to destroy your relationship with your father's memory. He was so careful to be a different man with you than he was with me. You adored him, and I couldn't bear to shatter that, especially right after losing him." Tears streamed down Samantha's face. "So, you've been living this double life for years, watching James and me struggle financially while sitting on millions." The accusation stung, even though I had anticipated it. I tried to help in ways that wouldn't raise questions. I defended. The wedding discounts, the scholarship connections, for law school, the car dealer incentive program. None of those were real. They were all ways I used my money to help without revealing its existence. Those were lies, too. Samantha stood abruptly pacing the dining room. Everything has been a lie. My entire childhood. Our relationship since Dad died. All of it. James spoke for the first time. Sam, try to understand your mother's position. She was protecting herself and you, too. By deceiving me for years, Samantha challenged, turning back to me. What kind of protection is that? The kind a mother provides when she sees no better option, I answered quietly. I'm not proud of the deception, Samantha, but I am proud that I found a way to free myself from your father's control, and that I've used some of that money to help other women do the same. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? The Monarch Foundation, I admitted. The one you almost volunteered for in law school. I created and funded it. Samantha sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. This is too much. I don't even know who you are anymore, or who Dad was, apparently. I reached for the folder I had prepared and placed it on the table between us. This contains everything. Financial records, documentation of your father's affairs, and gambling debts. My plan for legally declaring these assets and paying any penalties required. And a proposal for how we might use this money to improve your lives without creating the kind of dependency I experienced. Samantha stared at the folder without touching it. I need time to process this. Of course, I acknowledged. Take whatever time you need. The money isn't going anywhere, and neither am I. They left shortly afterward, the elaborate dinner largely uneaten, the conversation unresolved. Samantha's parting words were measured, controlled. I understand why you felt trapped, Mom, and I can even understand why you created your escape fund. But continuing the lies after Dad died, watching us struggle while you had millions, that's going to take time for me to reconcile. After they left, I sat alone in my dining room surrounded by the evidence of my decades-long deception. The relief of finally telling the truth was overshadowed by the pain in my daughter's eyes. Had I made a terrible mistake? Should I have taken this secret to my grave? For a week, Samantha didn't call. I respected her need for space, though each day of silence felt like punishment. Finally, on the 8th day, she texted, "Can we talk just us?" We met at a neutral location, a quiet tea shop halfway between our homes. Samantha looked tired but composed as she settled across from me. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began, and research. I found some of Dad's old financial records in boxes we stored after you sold the house. My heart sank. Had she discovered something I missed? Some evidence that contradicted my account. I found credit card statements, she continued, and records of cash withdrawals that make no sense for business expenses. I think you were telling the truth about his affairs. I wish I hadn't been, I said softly. She nodded to tears forming. I also found some journal entries where he wrote about feeling threatened by my independence, about how he planned to keep me financially dependent on him through college and beyond by offering help with strings attached. A cold anger rose in me at this posthumous confirmation of Richard's controlling nature, but I kept my expression neutral. This was Samantha's process of discovery, not mine. I'm still angry with you, she continued, but I'm beginning to understand. You were trapped in ways I never saw, and after he died, you thought you were protecting me. I was trying to, I affirmed, though I see now that my protection became another kind of control making decisions about what truths you could handle. She reached across the table and took my hand. I need complete honesty from now on. No more protecting me from truths you think I can't handle. I promise, I said, squeezing her hand. Complete transparency. Over the following weeks, Samantha and I rebuilt our relationship on this new foundation of truth. James proved to be a steadying influence, helping Samantha process her complicated feelings about both her parents without judgment. Together, we worked with Jeffrey Barnes to create a legitimate financial framework for the formerly hidden assets. The tax penalties were substantial, but manageable. More importantly, we established clear boundaries around how the money would and wouldn't be used. "I don't want to simply hand over millions, Vi," I explained during one of our planning sessions. "That kind of sudden wealth without purpose or preparation can be destructive." "We don't want handouts anyway," James assured me, "but we'd be foolish to pretend this couldn't help us build a more secure future." We developed a balanced approach. I helped them purchase a home in a safe neighborhood near good schools, structured as a low-interest loan rather than a gift. We established educational trusts for future grandchildren with guidelines emphasizing both opportunity and responsibility. We expanded the Monarch Foundation's work with Samantha, taking an active role in its legal advisory committee. Most meaningful to me was Samantha's decision to leave her corporate law position for the environmental advocacy work she was passionate about. The financial security my revelation provided allowed her to make career choices based on purpose rather than necessity, the very freedom I had spent decades trying to secure for myself. "You know what's ironic," she said during a Sunday brunch at their new home 6 months after my revelation. "Dad always taught me that money was the goal, the measure of success. But what you showed me is that money is just a tool. The real wealth is having the freedom to live according to your values." I smiled, recognizing my own hard-won wisdom in her words. That's exactly right. Financial independence isn't about the dollars. It's about the choices those dollars allow you to make. As I watched Samantha and James planning their future with both purpose and security, I felt a profound sense of completion. My long deception had ended. The truth, painful as it had been to reveal, had ultimately brought healing and genuine connection. The wealth that had been my secret burden was now our shared opportunity. Not to live extravagantly, but to live authentically, supporting causes we believed in and creating security without dependency. Most importantly, the cycle of financial control that Richard had established had been definitively broken. My daughter would never know the cage I had lived in for so many years. She would raise her children with both financial literacy and ethical clarity about wealth's proper place in a meaningful life. That I realized was the true fortune I had built over all those years of secret planning. Not the $9 million, but the freedom, wisdom, and authentic relationships that no amount of money could buy. Have you ever kept a secret to protect someone you love? Was there a moment you realized the protection had become a barrier? Share your experience in the comments below. If my journey from financial imprisonment to honest abundance resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength through life's challenges. And if you know someone who might need to hear that financial independence is possible even from the most controlling situations, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most valuable inheritance we can leave our children isn't money, but the courage to live truthfully.